sexual sin of keeping the Creator's word. The other day I did a lesson plan showing that the first few verses of Leviticus 18 discussed keeping the word of the Creator without adding any practices, and that would, since 18 is a sexual sins, then that's showing that's a sexual sin. And I had a lot of people screaming back to say that can't be, because you have to have sex to be a sexual sin. And realizing that that verse, or keeping the commandments, is in both Leviticus 18 and Leviticus 20, and those are sexual sin chapters, and that's in both of them. And then adding to that, we have Jeremiah 3, where the Creator says, I put away and divorced Israel for her whoring. Well, did everybody in Israel at the time, I don't want to give the rough time, but again, the 10 tribes, were they actually going out and were sleeping around? Were they sleeping with animals? Or were they actually doing idol worship? Because he tells you what the definition is in Jeremiah 3 by saying they were going after other idols. So he's defining it. The Creator's defined this as sexual sin. Who are we to say he's wrong? But let's, just for purposes of argument, let's go through some of the things in Revelation 2. Just Revelation 2, because we're getting continual warnings about sexual sin in Revelation for the churches. So let's just look at them, okay? We have the church of Pergamum in verse 14, Revelation 2:14, nevertheless, I have a few things against you. There are some among you who hold to the teachings of Balaam, who taught Balak to entice the Israelites to sin, so that they ate food sacrificed to idols and committed sexual immorality. Okay? And basically he said, I'm going to go and I'm going to fight against them with the word of my mouth. And then in the Thyatira, what we have is Jezebel, right? Verse 26. Verse 20. Nevertheless, I have this against you. You tolerate that woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophet. By her teaching, she misleads my servants into sexual immorality and eating food sacrificed to idols. So these things are coming up twice. So he's warning you in the same chapter twice about sexual immorality. Now, as I indicate, that would be not complying with the Torah, trying to add or subtract from the Torah. And if you take it that way, there's so many other warnings in Revelation 2, because you could add to that the Nicolaitans, you could add to that Antipas. So you get a lot of warnings here about sexual immorality if you say it includes adding or subtracting from the Torah, or trying to put their practices with it. Now, one of the things I said at that time was, listen, if he doesn't tell you how to do something, if he tells you to do something but doesn't tell you how, then if you're trying to elevate your how to Torah, that could be sexual immorality, or adding or subtracting from Torah, because you're trying to elevate your how to the actual command, which is just to do. If he tells you how, then you've got to follow that exactly. Whatever he's told you, you have to follow. But again, let's look through this, because this is a huge issue in Revelation 2, sexual immorality. So let's look, and again, we've already defined it in Leviticus 18, 1 through 5, and again, be careful to follow my decrees. You must obey my laws, keep my decrees and laws, for the person who obeys them will live by them. I am the Lord. So let's see which of these things, since he's warning us repeatedly, let's raise our hands if this is going to be a situation that you think is going to catch a lot of people during the Exodus. No one is to approach any close relative to have sexual relations. I don't know that there's going to be that many of us who are thinking that's a good thing to do. Don't have sexual relations with your mother. Wait a minute. How many mothers are going to come with us? It's highly unlikely if you're going that your mother's going, so I don't even know that you have the chance to do that, even if you wanted to, and nobody wants to. Do not have sexual relations with your father's wife. Is your father coming? Oh, probably not. Well, that's probably not going to be a factor at all. Nobody's trying to see their father's wife and say, I want to have sex with them. It just doesn't happen with our people, or realistically anybody in today's society. Don't have sexual relations with your sister. Raise your hand if that's you. How many of y'all are looking to say, all I want to have is sex with my sister? Because he's warned us twice in Revelation 2. Has anybody raised their hand yet? Do not have sexual relationships with your son's daughter or your daughter's daughter. I still wouldn't want to do that. That's disgusting. I hope we all say that's disgusting. Don't have sexual relations with the daughter of your father's wife. She's your sister. Yeah, that's disgusting. Who wants to do that? Don't have sexual relations with your aunt. Well, again, there's no aunts going with us. Don't have sexual relations with your mother's sister. Again, with your other side of the aunt. Well, that's not going to happen, so we're not worried about that one. Do not dishonor your father's brother by approaching his wife. I don't see that being a factor. The chances of your father's brother even being on the Exodus is remote. Yes, if you wanted to, and nobody wants to. Don't have sexual relations with your daughter-in-law. Again, it's a disgusting act. Who's thinking about this saying, wow, he's had to warn me repeatedly. I better raise my hand because I think this is going to catch us. Again, don't have with your brother's wife. Again, the chances you're going to have your brother there is rather remote, and specifically with his brother's wife. Don't have sexual relations with both a woman and her daughter. Ah, he caught us. That's the one that's going to catch us. That's what we've all been wanting, the mother and her daughter. That's just disgusting. It's not going to happen. Don't take your wife's sister as a rival wife. That's not going to be a factor. Don't approach a woman to have sexual relations during the uncleanliness of her monthly period. I think all of us are pretty well taught about that issue, and I think we're pretty well set on that we can't do that. Here's one that's probably it. Don't have sexual relations with your neighbor's wife. So adultery. So do you think there's a chance that if we're doing these things that the camp's not going to destroy you? What's the chances that we're going to wait till God destroys you for this, as opposed to the camp saying, I'm wiping you out for doing this? So far, I haven't seen anybody raising their hand, or I wouldn't raise my hand. Oh, it's got to be sacrificing your children to Moloch. Nah, probably not. Oh, you think it's going to be homosexual relationships? Do you think those in our faith are just dying to have homosexual relationships? Nah, I don't think so. Must be bestiality. Well, that's it. How many of y'all raised your hands? He keeps warning us repeatedly about sexual immorality. We just went through the sexual immorality here. How many hands are raised? Because he's warned us twice. And again, I think he's warned us more than that, because I see some other things where he's talking about the sexual immorality of adding, subtracting from Torah. But to those who say, no, sexual immorality has to be sexual immorality, all right, which one? Which of these things here is that factor? You know? And again, the Messiahs came in there to show us that the intent is there on the wife, but we know that from the Ten Commandments. You can't start coveting your neighbor's wife. So, we have this stuff already here in Torah. Why is he having to warn us this many times if it's just sexual morality that people say, oh, it's got to be a sexual act? It doesn't have to be. He wouldn't have to warn us like this, not repeatedly. I mean, the chances of somebody in our group being lost for one of these sexual immorality things is remote. And yet he's repeatedly warning us, this is a big deal to me. Okay? Revelation was written for us. It's an end-time book. If it's an end-time book and is specifically written for us, how many of us are thinking about these things in Leviticus 18 and saying, well, I just, if he would give me a little bit more strength, I'd stop doing this. I mean, come on. It's the only thing that fits, which is why it's so interesting, is that sexual immorality is, if you include that, it's in Leviticus 18 and 20 of keep my decrees and laws. Don't add their practices. And again, when you go through, there's no other option of what it's going to be. There's just not. Not for a huge, not where he's having to repeatedly warn us about it. And he repeatedly warns us about it. I would think with a group such as us, where their eyes are opened, if he says, don't do that, remember Leviticus 18, don't do those sexual sins, he'd say, okay. I wasn't planning on it, but I'll remember that real specifically. I mean, come on now. It's just not going to be a factor for the other things. But it shows you how intently he cares about you keeping the Torah and not to add or subtract about it. Remember, he's screaming at us in Revelation for our time. He was screaming at them during the first Exodus. And what did the Messiah do when he was here? He was teaching repeatedly, stop doing your practices. You're elevating your practices to that of the Torah. Don't do it. So all through the time, we keep seeing him saying, stop adding to my Torah. It's what I say, and what I say is all I said. Don't go any further than that. So I'm going to leave it to anyone who wants to watch this. And if you think it's got to be something sexual, of a sexual act that you're worried about, that he's repeatedly warning you about in Revelation 2, write down what that is. I mean, and tell me how many people you think will actually get caught with this during the Exodus. Because during the Exodus, just like the first Exodus, he's going to winnow us down. He's going to get rid of about 10% of us. And that's at a minimum, a bare bones minimum. How many of those do you think are really going to be for adultery? Because that's the only one I really see that could even really be a factor. But hey, if you think there's something else that is so important that 10% of us are going to get wiped out, go ahead and list it in the comment section.